Welcome, everybody, once again to another episode of Riders and Fighters. This is episode 24. I'm your host, AJ Ortega. And this week I interview Mickey Guida. He is an armored combat athlete. He called in while he was on the road. He was actually having some fights on the weekend over in New Hampshire, I believe. And so I hit him up because I thought it was about time I invite somebody from this interesting sport of medieval armored combat, and mostly to maybe understand a little bit more about the sport, maybe explain a little bit more about the sport for our audience, and to maybe differentiate it from some of the other things that are out there that maybe resemble the sport. And so it was really cool to have him on and talk about a number of things, like how he got started in the sport, the rules and how it's organized. We talk about how other martial arts are kind of incorporated. And then we talk about him traveling in his camper bus conversion. It's an old church bus that he's converted that he travels in so he can go compete and stuff. And so that's just a cool lifestyle he has. And I'm a car guy and a motorcycle guy, and he has a motorcycle. So we have a really good conversation, and we actually even wrap up talking about psychedelic medicine. So if you're interested in that stuff, definitely stick around and listen to that interview. All right, just some quick fight stuff. Nothing too in-depth today because I am kind of late uploading this episode, but it's okay. You guys will forgive me. I know. I think I might squeeze it in there right before midnight. We'll see. In any case, there was UFC on over the weekend, and the only fight I really want to talk about was the Ponzinibbio versus Baeza fight. And that was one of the ones that, fight of the night for sure. And I think is going to be a good contender for one of the best fights of the year. Back and forth, a really good slugfest. Just one of those matches that you might introduce somebody to MMA with because it was impressive. Bloody, not excessively bloody, but, you could see the competitiveness and also the technique and things like that. So that's one I recommend if you got like ESPN Plus, the Ponzinibbio versus Baeza fight. Yeah, that was a good one. And then there was the Showtime boxing card with Floyd Mayweather and Logan Paul headlining. And it was an interesting event. The opening match was actually an exhibition with Chad Johnson, Ep24, from the NFL. And he's just such a talented athlete. I thought, he might actually have an interesting shot at this. And he was a sloppy boxer, but he hung in there all 4 rounds. He was knocked down once. In the third, I believe. Yeah, he was knocked down, but got up, didn't get knocked out or anything. I mean, he's taking football hits. And so I think, it would take a lot to maybe knock him out, even in a boxing ring. So I thought he had a good showing, and it was an exhibition. And he's a very likable guy and talks well. And so it was a good showing. And the guy he fought was a real fighter. He has a MMA record of like 2-3 and a losing record of 0-3 in bare knuckle boxing. But he's a pro fighter. And I think he's had a few pro boxing fights, traditional boxing fights as well. But yeah, so Ep24 lost, but it was a good showing. I thought it was really, really good. And the next fight was Luis Arias versus Jarrett Hurd. And Jarrett Hurd's a former champion, but not a spectacular fighter by any means. But in any case, this was a slugfest. And it was a split decision win for Arias, even though I think he won decisively. I don't know what this other judge was watching. His overhand right kept finding the spot, and I don't know why Hurd didn't keep that left hand like up to his ear like he's holding a telephone like the entire match. It was interesting to see that he never figured out how to avoid that overhand right from Arias. And Arias doesn't have, knockout power because he was landing this overhand right repeatedly, but wasn't able to get Hurd onto the mat. There were issues with rain in the ring because it was an outdoor event, but the ring is covered, but the wind still kind of gets to the ring, and so they had to keep stopping. They stopped the action like 3 times and had these random dudes. At one point, the referee was on the ground and wiping up with a towel, and It was a mess. So I didn't know how that was going to affect the rest of the card, but it didn't affect it that much. It didn't. And then the next fight was Badu Jack versus Dervin Colina, who was a short notice replacement. I think he was a week or two out or something ridiculous like that. And so, again, not on the level of Badu Jack, and lost by a TKO in the fourth round because he was knocked down 3 times. The 3 knockdown rule was in effect, and so Badu Jack wins by TKO in the fourth. And then the Mayweather and Floyd Mayweather versus Logan Paul match goes the distance, and it's about what I expected. They were going to put on an exhibition. This was not a competitive match. There was not going to be announced a winner. These were the rules that were set up. There were no judges. There wasn't anything in terms of scoring. We can look at CompuBox numbers and things like that, but there were no official judges at ringside because this was an exhibition. But Logan Paul is a big boy and muscular and was gassed out like immediately. And so it was a sloppy fight, and so he's exhausting himself, and what I mean by sloppy is that he's tying Mayweather up and he's leaning on him because he's bigger and kind of getting him in like a guillotine choke and things like this. And so a really sloppy fight in that regard. He lands a few shots here and there, but they don't affect Mayweather. Mayweather lands several, but he's not. Mayweather, at no point is Mayweather in danger, And so, they went the distance, collected some big paychecks. Nobody got hurt. Because what does Floyd Mayweather gain if he's just like, okay, I'm going to go 100% on this kid and just knock him out and embarrass him? What does Floyd Mayweather gain from that? Well, a whole line of people probably want to negotiate for another exhibition of some kind. And if he does that, that won't be as lucrative because people will be scared to, or, so it's not a good business move. And Mayweather is Floyd Money Mayweather for a reason. And so it went about how I thought it would. They'd go the distance, again, put on a show. Mayweather certainly outclass him. And they'd walk away with a lot of money. Yeah, part of me wanted Mayweather to, turn it up at the end and just knock him out. But I don't think he gains anything there. And Mayweather is quite smart. And I do think that is the smart business move. So that's a quick little wrap-up of some fight stuff. Now on to some other fight stuff, which is the interview with Mickey Guida, who called in from being on the road. We had a good conversation, so listen up and enjoy. All right, I am sitting here bright and early with Mick the Merc from Instagram, who I was intrigued by. Tell the audience a little bit about who you are and why maybe you were invited on the podcast.
So I think I'm invited on the podcast because I do an interesting sport called armored combat. Very much like MMA, but with real weapons and real armor.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I'm kind of familiar with. Like, I know it exists. I have a friend of mine that was pretty deep in it back in the day, and he's kind of educated me a bit on it. And so I've always found it really interesting, really fascinating, the armored combat subgenre of the fight world. It's a really interesting one. How did you first get into armored combat stuff?
Honestly, there was a show put on called Night Fight, and it was on Hulu, and it's free on the History Channel or YouTube. Anybody can check it out. And some of the best fighters and some people who've never fought, in like a steel fighting choreographer, he got in there and he actually ended up winning like one of the TV shows. And I was like, hey, I could do that. If it's something that somebody who's never swung a sword, like I could get into that. And the first time I put on armor, it sucked so bad. I wanted to be out of it immediately. And that's what got me into it, was actually this like fear, this overwhelming anxiety of not being good at something and just being like, all right, I need to overcome that.
That's a really cool one. And so just like observing that you can pick up something new or new-ish. And if you put in the time and the effort and the training, you can get pretty good at lots of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you meet the right people and actually do your research and It's such a new sport too. Everybody's trying to figure out the formula right now. We're not exactly sure what's the best for everything, and the meta is really evolving constantly.
Yeah, that's one of the things I have heard from my buddy Jeff. Shout out to Jeff. He might be listening and stuff, but he's also stressed the kind of like the community that's built through the armored combat stuff, and that you get pretty tight with the people you're fighting alongside and things like this, which I always think is a good bonus in terms of like, maybe getting in shape, maybe learning how to swing a sword or throw a punch or whatever the case may be, but also that like, oh, you got people, right? And we might be banging each other up and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's something to bring us together. And that the sport is quite new. That's what's really fascinating to me, because you're looking at something that it looks like from hundreds of years ago, because you are
Yeah.
wearing armor. But the sport in and of itself, in terms of its growth and whatnot, I think it's quite new, quite
Very
new
new,
from my
yeah.
observation anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of stems out of a group called SEA, where they use like wooden weapons and lighter armor, and they have kingdoms, and I think really what happened is some Americans went over to Europe and saw that they were doing real armor, that they had figured out how to forge properly and make it protective, and they started using real weapons, and it just kind of escalated from there. And now we have authentic committees that make sure our armor is actually within like the same century, at the same region. Like I can't just wear Russian scale armor
Okay.
with a 15th century salad. Like it's actually, you have to understand some history too involved in all this.
Okay, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. And so you said it was kind of like an extension of the SCA stuff. And again,
Yeah,
I've seen those groups and stuff like that, maybe on a college campus or something like this.
right.
But could you maybe like explain the distinction of like, because there's the stuff that is this very group based battles, and then there's also like on the other end of this spectrum, stuff that looks like guys in armor and things like this, but it's like role playing or storytelling kind of groups, right?
Yeah.
And so what is that distinction? What does that spectrum look like from like, these people that are having fun in the park and developing a little character and we're, doing this and that versus, again, these European fights I've seen on YouTube where there's just, I'm like, what is this? Like these guys are clanging into each other full force. And so
Yeah,
what does that spectrum look like?
Honestly, first off, I'm going to lead with I don't want to be disparaging towards anybody on the fantasy spectrum. We have a
Sure.
lot of people who come from like the LARP world, which
Sure.
you might have seen from what's that called? Role Models,
Yeah,
that movie.
tremendous movie.
Yeah, great movie and a fantastic way to introduce people to LARP. But yeah, because there's a lot of genres of LARP, and
LARP standing for
live action role playing.
right. Cool.
So you create your own character and you fight with foam, and that's outside of that, like LARP itself. There's a thing called buffering, and you get to fight with foam, and there's points, and there's kingdoms, and all sorts of things like that. So it's not to be disparaging. They're just not using real weapons. A
Sure.
lot of people come from that world because we even spar. We train with foam weapons because
Sure.
it's so dangerous to use steel weapons. So that's like the lower end of the spectrum, I guess you'd say, for like safety wise.
Sure.
And then you get into like a couple EMP and SCA, where in HEMA, a historical European martial arts, and that's more like the fencing style, score a few points, get a death blow. You have light armor on, fencing gear, wooden weapons or fake weapons. So that's a good middle ground, and you're really focused on European martial arts.
Okay, like technique stuff, right?
Yes, a lot of stabbings and thrusts and throws and that kind of stuff, and it's usually like to the death, quote unquote.
True.
And then you get into steel fighting, and there's a couple categories. So you have Bohurt, Buhurt, and that's a group combat sport. So make that distinction. It's not contact like football. It is combat sport, and you can do 5 versus 5 all the way up to 150 versus 150, as long as you have even teams. And it's to the ground. So if you throw them on the ground, they're considered a dead body. If you beat them senselessly with an axe and they submit or get knocked out and they go to the ground, they're a dead body and they're out. And the whole goal is to just decimate your other team. Just yesterday, I had somebody put me in a guillotine, bend me over, and sell it. Can I swear on this? Sorry.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We say whatever we want.
Kill
Fuck,
this motherfucker.
shit, balls.
Kill this motherfucker. Yeah. He's screaming, kill this motherfucker. I have another guy grabbing my leg and a third guy hitting me in the ass where I don't have any metal with an axe.
So,
And
suffice to say, it sounds like it gets pretty serious on the field, man.
yeah, I mean, even for like a rookie event, like I was getting opened up pretty good. So, but yeah, so it's real weapons, it's real armor, and it's combat. It's a lot of people get broken this or that. I have a few injuries right now that I'm fighting through. So yeah, that's the big distinction is just the how heavy the hits are.
Yeah,
How
contact, the actual contact, like.
yeah, it's real weapons, man. And if your armor fails or anything like that, you could die. Like it's really close.
No, I've seen some of the. I guess I kind of see this similar into not the way that the sports are kind of like executed, but like maybe organized and things like that. The professional wrestling world. I do a lot of professional wrestling stuff on this podcast as well.
Mhm.
That like there is a what can I say? Well, like you're on the road a lot.
Yeah,
There's that certain kind of camaraderie.
yeah,
And then there's also that thing that like people don't know what they're watching. People like don't know what they're watching if they're watching medieval, armored combat kind of stuff, or like this pro wrestling stuff. So I like that there's a certain like level of education that people need to kind of excavate. I think that's a good thing. I think that's an interesting thing.
yeah. And I think there's a few good people like Paul Friedel, Ringo, and Brett Skinner who are really putting out good content about what the sport is, and they're doing fight reviews to show you like, oh, that person didn't just throw him; he used Uchimata, like
Sure.
this person you just judo throw,
Right.
because that's what's happening now. Is over the years it was more of hobby-ish, and like you said, a circus. Like we kind of travel, we
Right.
fight at rent fairs,
Mhm.
but now it's getting sports oriented, sports optimized, and people are studying all sorts of disciplines in order to do better, and it's becoming a professional sport.
Yeah, yeah. And like the wrestling guys too, you guys will show your bruises and your cuts and stuff like
Oh
that,
yeah,
and it's like I'll be scrolling through somebody's Instagram and then it's like pictures of
yeah,
dudes in armor and whatnot. Then one of just like a guy's thigh completely purple from getting jacked with a steel weapon for
yeah.
all weekend long. Um,
Yeah, I just put up my butt bruise from yesterday, holding a button.
great, that's great.
we're yeah, we're a weird bunch, and honestly, it's because the sport's so humbling.
Sure.
Because at any moment somebody could win. It's not a one-on-one. It's all of a sudden your back's turned and somebody hits you in the kidney with an axe and you're down. Like
Right.
at any moment you could lose, and that's what makes the sport so humbling.
And so, how long have you been doing the armored combat stuff?
So I got into it August last year.
Oh, so you're
Um,
pretty new to it
I'm
then.
really new. I'm very new. Yeah. So, like I said, I hated the fact that I was bad at it. So I started traveling and training underneath a bunch of different people, and then started teaching in Nashville. And
Oh yeah.
the students just kept growing and coming. And then I ended up doing really well at a region international qualifier. And so once I won that position to represent the United States, I got phone calls from some of the best people in the world, like asking to help or offering to meet up, and it just accelerated my path.
No, yeah, just looking at your Instagram, it looked like you're pretty all in, for somebody who's only been in it for a year. It's like you're geared up and again, every weekend or two there you are with new photos and whatnot. And so that's pretty awesome, man. That's great.
Approaching this sport, there's a lot of mental health that comes along with this. Like, during our practices, we take mental health breaks to check in with people. A lot of people are coming from like military PTSD. There's nothing really for military to come back to, that camaraderie that you
Oh yeah,
talked
sure.
about.
Always, yeah.
Yeah, and some outlet for some violence. The
Sure.
world's kind of a violent place anyway, so we need an outlet. Like, there's a lot of
Yeah.
mental health aspects to this specific sport that you can't find anywhere else, and that's what really drew me in to be like, all right, this helped me a lot overcome my mental health issues. I'm going to help as many people as I can, so I have to be good. I don't care about winning. I have to be good so I can teach people and make sure that they're doing well. That's what motivates me.
No, I find one of the huge pluses from all sorts of combat sports in specific is it's good for your brain and your mind. It's aside from getting some skills to where you could again throw a punch or swing an axe, right? That there's also this other thing that we really need, which is to keep the mind sound, and that there are energies in us that might be explosive or violent, and there's appropriate places for this, right? And so, like in a boxing gym, on the field of a armored combat event, right? These kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so, what were some surprising moments, or maybe surprising moments or memorable moments from when you first started? Like, I always love the early training, early fight stuff when you get into something where you're banging around with somebody else.
Yeah, I'm coming up on my first year of my first fight, which was in Nashua, New Hampshire, where the Knights Hall's at. And I showed up just to do some training, figure some things out. And they're like, hey, you have armor, right? I'm like, yeah. And there's like, well, we're having this big chapter war between us and Dallas. Like, can you come and fight? And I said, sure, why not? I'd only been in armor for a week. So they have like the executioners from the Knights Hall have like their best dudes out there. And then there's 5 absolutely new people and 5 people from Dallas against them, and just absolutely got rocked. I mean, I got my first gap in the shoulder blade. I couldn't lift my arm, so they just strapped a shield to me and threw me back out there. Like, it was way more intense than I thought, but I'm glad I got it out of the way, because now I can take hits in all these weird places, and I know the difference between if it hurts or if it's an injury.
Okay,
which is
good.
a big thing you will never learn unless you've been hit hard a bunch of times, to know the difference between, okay, I got hit in the butt, I'm fine for at least a couple more hits. Oh no, they hit me in the arm and I may have broken my arm. I need to go down.
Yeah, I can't carry this shield anymore, or this sword or whatever thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll usually always jump back in, but it was a crazy event because I never even held a sword at that time. I was just using a wooden stick, and Brandon Ross from the Knights Hall, he invited me out for a sword and buckler dueling contest, and I didn't know what I was doing. I just ran out there, started swinging, and ended up winning gold in that event, just because I just kept putting my head down, breathing as hard as I could, because it's exhausting. Like, it's like a dead sprint for 90 seconds.
No, it seems, again, just the weight you're carrying. It's outdoors. Heat. It's metal. Like, those kinds of things. I'm like, it must be pretty grueling, like on a summer battlefield.
Yeah. I mean, you're wearing a blanket, first off.
Okay.
That's your first layer, is this blanket. It's called a gambeson and chausses, traditional under armor, because it protects you from your own armor.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So you're wearing a thick wool blanket, and then you're putting the armor on top of that. So yeah, you're hot just standing there.
Yeah. Wow. And so you've mentioned a little bit about, there's different spots you can go train now. Like, there's gyms for this stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that speaks to some of the like organizing that's happening within this sport, right? People are getting more organized, and we're trying to give it some sort of like structure. Is there like some sort of larger organizational structure for, again, the fighting kind of armored combats, but very, the steel stuff? Is there an organizational structure there in terms of like, when do fights happen, how regularly, or are they tournament style? And is it like, okay, we have an event in March, then one in June, and one like, how organized is that level of fighting nationwide?
With COVID, things did change. I believe there was more structure leading into it, and then COVID ruined everything. But it's a little disjointed right now because there are 3 organizations alone in the United States.
Okay.
ACW, ACS, and AMCF. And they put on events simultaneously sometimes, or a week apart. Plus, we also deal with overseas organizations, HMB and IMCF, and they have qualifiers, and there's different rules for both of them. It's kind of a cluster right now.
Okay.
I would like to see personally like an American league where it's only 2 months long, and you have some sort of regionals, and you win, and then you win into the semifinals and finals, like something like that.
Right.
And also somehow include both the one-on-ones and the groups simultaneously. I'd like to see that, because one-on-ones usually get the shaft during those big tournaments, because it's exhausting to do one-on-ones, and then you have to go fight with your team. And so most people don't. They're just like, I want to support my team. I'm going to not do any one-on-ones during this tournament. It's a 12-hour day of fighting, Yeah. So the organization's a little wonky right now, and I think everybody's just trying to figure out who's going to take the charge. What do the fighters really want out of this?
Right.
And some people are afraid to lose what they have, because like, there are older people, there are people like me who aren't like gonna be a superstar like in 3 years. Like there's gonna be better people, of course. Like some 24-year-old's gonna kick my ass, next week, and the sport's gonna become a sport instead of more of this hobby-ish thing. And I think a lot of people are afraid to lose that. So it's hard to organize when people have some fear and aren't communicating with each other well. So
That's the youngness of this sport, and as you were just talking about it, it does sound very, very much like the legitimizing of mixed martial arts at the national and international level, which wasn't a thing until a couple decades ago. It's a brand new sport, but it's like, but people have been fighting it's wrestling itself. Wrestling, grappling is the oldest sport, and we've barely got like this level of organization in the mixed martial arts, right? And so it's really interesting to kind of see these sports that were seen kind of fringe, which is, I think most people would put armored combat there, right? But that it is hyper athletic, it is dangerous, it is exciting to watch. I watched one of the things that once I saw the level of this was the Battle of Nations. Right?
yes,
like I stumbled upon that like here and there, even I think independently of my buddy Jeff who introduced me to this. Like I've seen that, like, just this big rumble of dudes and stuff, but then the representation of countries and things like that. That was really interesting to see in that international, like, this is a global thing. Like,
yeah. They're trying to get it into the Olympics. They only need a few more countries to register, and then it'll be put in the Olympics. Like it's a thing. Right now, the Battle of the Nations is our Olympics. I had to qualify to earn a spot to go there and represent USA.
And then once you're like fighting in that world, are you like fighting alongside guys that you haven't like trained with and stuff like this?
Yeah, like I fly around to different camps just to meet these people that I'll be fighting with. Yeah, so I'll be in Portland. I'm in Nashua, New Hampshire right now. I was down in Dallas. I'll be doing some more skill scrimmages, or what they're calling it, a skill grimmage.
Okay.
So
cool.
Yeah, it's once you make it to that level where you're really brought into Team USA, like the world opens up and your skills accelerate so quickly because there's so much information from all these great fighters in the United States. So that's a big plus of using that system, that Battle of Nations international system. Like I said, I'd still like to see a USA system.
Yeah, for sure.
But because that's why it's so disorganized. Is there's so many people all around the United States trying to figure out how to go international, and there's only a few spots. So
right. Another one of the things I've seen that I think is related to this or part of this armored combat world is I've seen like one-on-one armored combat, but like in a cage, in an MMA style cage, or in a boxing style ring. Even I've seen that.
With chains sometimes. Like
really?
Chains.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. And so is that like part of these events that you have, or is this something also that's coming up? Because I think I've seen it like an exhibition of that stuff, like during like a Russian MMA event that was like a pretty decent pro MMA event, and they had that like on the undercard or something like that.
Yes. So that's kind of where it started from, and now they're introducing it into the international competition. Like it's called a pro fight. Right.
Okay.
So there's one-on-ones where you can do sword and shield for points, the long sword for points, pole arms for points, great swords for points. Like you have all these dueling categories.
Okay.
Where it's one-on-ones and you're not trying to kill the other person. You're just getting points.
Okay.
Still hurts, but but the MMA style, the pro fight, that's 3-minute rounds, and you can do whatever you want except for submissions. That's it. You do whatever you want. There's a few places you can't hit. That's true. The part that makes it the hardest is that you see MMA go to the ground, right?
Yeah.
And they can kind of hang out there. They can hang out against the wall. They don't let us. We go to the ground. We have 10 seconds to do what we can, and they stand us right back up.
Oh,
and we have to keep fighting. And if we're clenched against the rail, the list, or we're caught in the chain, they break us up, start the fight again. Like they do not let you relax the whole 3 minutes, and you're also carrying 40 pounds of armor, swinging a 5-pound weapon with a 5-pound shield strapped to your arm. Like, yeah, pro fights are if you interview any Russians or watch any of they talk about it like it's like the top level athletes can do that. Like
Okay.
MMA guys wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, again seeing that, and like you were explaining the different kind of rule set. That's like a just like a striking kind of sport. Then high energy, no lulls in the action because you can't clinch on the fence, can't grapple on the ground.
Yeah.
So let's get your ass up and bang into each other with metal again.
Yeah. And imagine like judo is a great sport to be studying. And that's something I'll be studying more because like my throw techniques are garbage. Um, but that's yeah, it's judo and striking. Like it's super intense. Imagine landing with 40 pounds of extra weight on you, with another guy landing on you with 40 pounds. And then he props himself up with a knee in your sternum and just starts punching you in the face with a shield. And if you turn over, he'll hit you in the ass with a sword. Like,
Yeah, I'm like that's just MMA stuff. The knee on the belly and just like okay, there we go. You know, and so you mentioned judo. You mentioned
yeah,
judo, which seems again in those close quarters, and I saw some judo throws, like specifically just judo throws.
yeah.
In some of the stuff I was watching online. Do you train in other combat sports, or are there other things that you find helpful, or other kind of drills that you guys incorporate into your training that are like boxing, grappling, jujitsu style things, or what other kind of things do you specifically train in?
Yeah, 100%. I started with just the dueling stuff just because it was easier, less equipment, less pain, less everything. But now that I've gone to all these different schools, we're stepping up our grappling game. Like, so tons of like Greco-Roman wrestling just for endurance in general.
Oh yeah.
And then throwing in the judo throws. I'm talking to instructors about coming helping us out in Nashville. And then boxing. Boxing is a great background. The only thing is boxing has some bad habits. So, because you have to fight southpaw first off with your weapons hand forward.
Oh,
So
okay.
you have to switch your stance. So you can't carry, boxing doesn't translate that way. And then the whole tucking your chin in when you get close to somebody. Yeah, you cannot do that because your head is like extended a bit
Okay.
and it's heavy. It's another 12 pounds, 16 pounds in your head. So you'll get in a guillotine. I get in a guillotine all the time because
Oh
I
wow.
dip
Yeah.
my chin from like an old boxing bad habit, and I get my head rocked all the time.
No, yeah, there might be some things like, oh, well, boxing, you gotta get your feet under you. That's the best thing, right? So, but then it's like, oh, but then there's this thing that you're not counting on boxing with a helmet on, like
Yeah,
and so they
yeah, with
grab you.
5 pound gloves on each hand. Yeah,
Yeah, all that stuff. How interesting. So you do invite people from other disciplines to come help out and round you guys out a bit.
yeah, absolutely. And during the team version of this, you can't go to the ground or you're out as well.
Okay.
So we've had some difficulties finding the right kind of martial art that can help us throw people without going down. And judo's been the only one that really, because Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you get into the ground and then you dominate on the ground.
Sure. Right.
Judo's like that big throw, just
Right.
get
The
them
slam.
away, go
Yeah.
down. Yeah. And if you look up Brett Skinner, he's a great guy to talk to about that stuff.
Okay.
He's from the Dallas Warlords. I can send you some information to later. And
Yeah.
he has lots of videos. He's the number one takedown specialist in our sport. And you'll see him just sitting against the wall, and two guys will be on him, and they'll just move a little bit, and he'll knock him down. Just a Uchimata or something like that, or a
Sure.
Sotogari, just right off the rail.
Right.
Yeah. And we can use the rail in some versions of the sport.
Okay.
So you
Okay.
can actually grab onto it and increase the power of your throw because you're anchored to a wall that can hold, thousands of pounds of men beating each other up on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
So great
cool.
guy to talk to because he comes back. He has a background in judo. He's one of the best in Texas right now.
No, yeah, I might have to hit him up. Yeah, the having like again a judo base or something, but being able to adapt it to the rules that we have, the different physical parameters you have with the shield and the sword in hand and
Yeah.
helmet on your head, armor on your body, all these kinds of things, and how you have to adapt, some very basic, really old principles like that are found in judo.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. I think that's
You
very
can't
cool.
grab or anything like that. There's nothing because it's illegal to like try to strip armor off people. If
Okay.
they see you pulling armor off, they'll kick you out.
See, and that's like so not Brazilian jiu-jitsu
No,
because you
no.
train with a gi and it's like, well, I'll choke you out with the gi, like I'll grab that to throw you, to hip throw you or whatever.
Yeah, and
And
we can.
you
Yeah,
can't grab onto a shoulder or again, the armor and hook on and launch
yeah.
people.
It'd be hard anyways because you're wearing gauntlets on your
Oh yeah,
hands.
it'd be metal on metal. It'd be,
Yeah, you
yeah,
just slide off. Yeah, you see a lot of new people do like head grabs, and they pop out.
sure.
Because they don't know how to sink in their elbow. They think that their wrist strength is going to hold it.
Yeah, like just finger strength and just grabbing onto something, but
Yeah,
it's like,
like
oh
a
no,
movie
sure,
clench. Yeah,
sure.
like a tie clench.
Right, right.
Yeah,
No, but you
it's not
got to
enough
get
that you have
like
to really
joint
get in there.
locks and get
Yeah,
like, hooked in somewhere. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a big problem for me too. Like I'm the small guy out there, comparatively to a lot of people. So I'm usually cooking. I'm running around, hitting
Okay.
people, running somewhere else, getting a quick toss, running somewhere else. Because there are different positions that you can play in this sport, and I'm a runner. So
Okay.
yeah. So when I get into a clench with a big guy, I'm so scared to just like get in super tight, but which I should have the advantage because they're usually taller, so they're bent over. All that weight from their helmets bringing them down to me. I should be able to get a good toss in real quick, but I'm still too scared to get super tight.
And so you mentioned a couple of other combat sports that are kind of incorporated into this in your training and whatnot. Before Armored Combat, did you train in anything?
No, I had a little bit of boxing, living in Montana, just rough town kind of stuff, bad boys boxing. That's it.
Okay.
I was musician, drinker, smoker, like philosophy student.
Philosophy student. There we go. You're talking to an English major, so we're
There
at
we
least
go.
from
Yeah,
there we're cut from a similar cloth.
same.
So I know you were. I know you fought this weekend. I know you're on the road actually fighting, and you squeezed out time this morning to talk to me, and I think that's awesome. And I can see your thumb. One of your thumbs was blackened out because it got mashed. Yeah, and so so you're out there doing your thing, and I saw on Instagram that you got like an old church bus that you're like converting into like a little tiny home on wheels type of thing. I'm a big car guy. This is like the other thing I'm into is like cars and bikes and whatnot. So I saw your camper van and then also like your motorcycle. Let's talk vehicles for a little bit. Let's talk about things with motors. So
Yeah, that's
tell me
great,
about
man.
that camper project, man.
Yeah, so I've toured as a musician, so I'm very at home with being in a small van. And I owned a house, and it just wasn't me. Just being stuck to something you have to maintain all the time. And with all this traveling that I do for the sport, I was like, if I can travel, get somewhere, and camp out for 7 days, I've made my money back instead of getting a hotel room. And so it just made a lot of sense. I got a church bus that was hit by a tornado that came through like Tennessee last because we Nashville's had it rough. Like we got hit by a tornado, COVID. Somebody tried to blow up downtown like on Christmas Day.
Oh fuck. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been gnarly in Nashville. But yeah, I got a church bus that was hit by a tornado. Plugged all the holes, with some metal sheets, and started renovating the inside of it. And it's going well. I love Ford Econolines, right?
Yeah.
I've had a 250 before, tour bus, and bought it with 180,000 miles, put up to 330,000 miles on it, and sold it for the same price I got it.
Oh
Like
sure. Yeah. Those big motors. What kind of motors in that?
in the 450 that I have, I think it's the 5.6,
Okay.
5.8.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Oh
the only
yeah.
thing that's ever gone wrong is the alternator on both vehicles.
Yeah.
Like I was just in Dallas and I hit a pothole and my alternator just like caught fire. But that's it. Like everything else about the engine, like just runs and runs and runs and runs.
Yeah,
No problem.
and a Ford again with that motor that is in every big van that they have. Like you can get that work done anywhere in the country. Those kinds
Yeah,
of things is that's the way to go, man. And again, those
yeah,
big motors. Again, the bigger the motor, the longer it lasts. Some people don't
yeah.
understand. It's like that's why little tiny economy car motors can't make it to 200,000. You get a big
No,
truck, a big van. I was like, it'll go to 300, 400, 500. You know.
I know, and I got it because it was. I mean, it's damaged, waterlogged, that kind of stuff, which I can fix that. But when it came to the engine, I'm like, I don't know what I can do with it. 104,000 miles on it, and I bought the thing for 2 grand. Like, what a
Dude,
what a steal! Yeah,
dude,
yeah.
wow. No, that's a great deal.
Yeah, it
And
was a great deal. I got it last year, and I didn't think I'd be ready to like hit the road, but then I got that qualifying spot, so I'm like, all right, I have to hit the road. So
yeah, you got to get the
yeah,
reps in.
yeah, and so I've been just working on it nonstop, trying to get it going, and we kind of rushed the bike rack that we put on the back.
Uh,
we we welded something together to put my motorcycle on it because it's just a lot easier to get around on a motorcycle in cities and stuff.
sure.
And between Dallas and Houston at 2:30 in the morning, middle of nowhere, just all the bumps slowly bent the carriage all the way to the ground. I was just dragging it, so I had to unbolt the platform, the bike back platform, and ditch it
Oh,
on the
wow.
side of the road, and then pull my bed apart in the back of the van and just ramp my motorcycle, flew it into the back of the bus, and just for the next week I just slept on the floor next to my motorcycle. So it's a trial,
That's
it's
so
something
cool.
new.
No,
But
that's awesome. Yeah.
yeah, I might upgrade. I'm to a truck and a trailer. Like, just it might be a little easier than this whole bus stuff, but like I'm definitely gonna finish out the bus. It's nice to have the solar, and yeah, you could live in it super easily. It's not
No,
hard at all.
no, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, for a while I wanted to get, like a Class B RV of some kind, and then be like not do the house thing, and kind of cruise around on that.
yeah,
But ended up getting the house, but and a two-car garage, and so I have a '97 Chevy Astro van, and so I got all the
yeah.
back seats. It's all-wheel drive. I'm in Salt Lake City. There's snow up here. I got an
Mm,
$800 vehicle, and it's the best tank I've ever bought. And I've had a bunch of cool, weird shit and stuff in my vehicle past, but it is such a cool, simple, like just a tank of a vehicle. Bought with 200,000 miles. I got like 220 now.
yeah, damn.
My buddy
Yeah.
Jeff flew up here and shipped he was doing the foam fighting up here. He was going to go to like Idaho or something. And I was like, dude, you can take my van, go for it. And he just put a cot back there and camping stuff, and he bombed off like in my $800 like not road tested van, and just took off to go fight and came back. He's like, dude, it was fine. He was like, it was awesome actually. So
They were made to last. I'll tell you what.
yeah. And so, what kind of bike is that though? What kind of motorcycle you ride?
It's a Harley Sportster, 105th anniversary, 1200 XL.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, yeah. I had a little
yeah,
883 Sporty that I really liked.
yeah. I
Uh,
mean, a Sportster's great, man. I've taken it across country though, and it's murder on the back. So
oh,
don't do it. I went from Montana to the East Coast down in like North Carolina, and then all the way up to New York City. Yeah,
all
it
on the
was.
bike. Yeah, that's a lot of miles, dude.
Yeah, a lot of rain and snow because it was the fall. So I hit like snow in the Poconos after like a 14-hour shot from North Carolina to like Scranton.
Jesus.
Yeah, I only had 2 weeks to like do the whole trip. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, you got to meet those daily goals on the road, man, or else
yeah.
you're.
There's like 500 miles the first day. Don't care. Don't
Yeah,
care what happens.
yeah,
500 miles, even if it's nighttime. Go,
yeah,
go, go.
exactly. Yeah, the
'Cause I
most
mean,
I'll do in about a day is about 600.
yeah, you don't. Yeah.
Yeah, five or
I mean, I
six
know
hundred is hard
people
in a day.
with like Dynaglides and whatnot, but like, they're pretty comfortable the whole time.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll do a 1,000 mile day on a Goldwing.
Right.
Like like I'll do 1,000 mile day on that. But on my Sportster, oh shit, 5 mile 500 is Sadville, USA, man. Fuck.
Mhm. You're just hoping it breaks down so you don't have to do it anymore.
There's been so many times I've been on my motorcycle and it's like whatever shitty weather or what, and you're just like, what am I doing? And you're just in the middle of nowhere, still just throttle pin, just going, and like, why did I choose to do this? I would think about that, like driving in Texas, in like across Texas in the summer, and it's like that, it's like the hair dryer in your face at full blast, high heat, just the
Whole
entire
time.
time. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was saying I've done Texas, like Austin traffic in the summer, which
Oh,
sucks.
yeah, your bike's
Yeah.
overheating.
Yeah, exactly. And then I lived in Montana for 13 years, so
Okay.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, just open road, all of a sudden there's a hailstorm ahead, and you're like, I didn't wear a helmet or a t-shirt. I'm just gonna go into this hailstorm, I guess. I,
Very cool.
I, I took a pack of cigarettes once, back when I smoked, and took the cellophane off and put it over my eyes just so I could keep going because the rain was hitting my eyes so much and it just hurt. There's no helmet law in Montana, so and
Um,
those storms just roll in. You never know when it's gonna hit. So just cellophane over the eyes, and I kept going.
that's a good one, man. Hell yeah. And so you mentioned the when we were talking about the church bus and converting it and all that stuff, that you had done some of the road as a musician.
Yeah.
And so this is the Writers and Fighters podcast. I just interview people that write stuff or that do the fighting thing. So you're clearly a fighter, but do you do any reading or writing, or did you have any like songwriting in terms of that, you being a musician or any other kind of creative stuff you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coming with that philosophy background, I mean, I studied that and music technology in college. And so, yeah, besides like the poetry and the writing of songs and stuff like that, because lyrics are definitely my favorite part of songs. Like,
Good.
even if it's silly or sad, it has to be somehow thoughtful. Funny stuff doesn't have to be crass. It
Sure.
has to be intellectually stimulating in some regard. So when I had a more humorous band, everything was storytelling. Everything was trying to set a scene and make you imagine yourself there. Like I love writing in that way. I mean, big fan of Tom Robbins or Chuck Palahniuk and their ability to develop characters that are super, super deep and complicated, and they make you take the time to do that. And so same with music. If I listen to a song and it's just, all right, I understand how you feel, that's fine, but I need to be there somehow and pulled into it. So yeah,
Very
I
cool.
definitely do a lot of writing that regard. And then this whole camper van idea of training was actually to set myself up so I could finish writing a bunch of stuff that I've started a long time ago, just crazy life memoir
Good.
ideas. So
Good.
um,
No, you
I
should
read a
knock those
lot.
out. You should knock those
Yeah,
out. Knock out those chapters, man, while you're on the
I
road. That's
I know
cool.
it's finding some time. When I get hurt, that's a good time for me to like sit and write because I have nothing else to do, or at least I shouldn't be doing anything else. But yeah, I'm excited to get back into writing. Like I think I just pulled myself away to get through that rat race grind living in Nashville, and now things are starting to settle back down again, and I can start writing again, which is really nice. I miss it. Yeah, life's been interesting. You don't really end up in this spot like unless you've been through some shit, and I'm excited to like write about it and share it. So
No, that'd be very cool, man. That'd be very cool. Hell yeah.
yeah, and I like helping people too, and I study a lot of like shamanism and philosophy and just the best ways to deal with this linear reality that we have right now. So wouldn't I don't want to be egotistical, but I wouldn't mind sharing some of my thoughts on it for other people to get into.
No, I think that's good, and having to study philosophy and whatnot, like you're coming from a base where you're not full of shit. I mean,
Right.
so which when you go down when we start talking about all that kind of stuff, it's like yeah, you can fall into the trap of being kind of goofy or something. But like, oh no, if
Yeah.
you know what you're talking about, then people should hear it. You should put that stuff down. You should excavate that a bit and put that out
Mhm.
in the world.
Yeah. I mean, philosophy is full of shit. I mean, all of it. It's somebody like look at Descartes. Like
Bunch
he's
of
just
dudes
like,
thinking too much.
yeah. Descartes just like, you know what? If I can't solve something, I'll just stop. And then he's just like, you know what? I can't solve something, so God. All right, God's the answer. Let's move on from the cogito and write a whole book about it. He had like 5 pages of good shit, and then he bullshitted the rest of it. Like I listen to a lot of Alan Watts. Like he's definitely the guy who's like, I'm not here to tell you anything except for everything is bullshit and just enjoy yourself. And
I like that
that whole
philosophy.
Eastern philosophy, meshed with that Western religion, I guess, because that's the problem with Western philosophy is after Socrates, it became
Becomes
religion.
religion. Yeah.
Yeah, and
It
a
becomes
lot of
through
it was
the
commissioned.
deity. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
Saint Augustine was commissioned to write.
The Confessions.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. Damn, making me dust off some of those books I read back here. Shit, man.
yeah.
Yeah.
If you haven't read the Symposium, read the Symposium by Plato. It's a short read, and they pretty much are celebrating some thespian festival, and there's like Socrates is like, send away the whores, get some wine, let's talk about love, and they just pontificate about what love is, and it's a
Oh,
great
that's
like
cool.
little snapshot of like the time because it's derogatory at least
Right.
some of the boy love and
Sure.
and some of the weird religious aspects of what love was to them. So it's a fun book to read too. If anybody's like interested in philosophy at all, do the Symposium. It's just fun. It's a fun way to get into philosophy.
Very cool. You mentioned shamanism. What's your interest in shamanism?
Honestly, seeing the world finally make the shift to like psychedelics helping out with mental health illnesses, I wanted to dig into that more. And in the United States, it's clandestine right at the moment, to do that stuff, minus a few states. But outside of our country, it's part of their lifestyle. Besides the fact that they introduced Christianity into a lot of their practices, they
Sure.
still do a lot of like Maria Sabina. She's from Mexico.
From San Jose del Pacifico. Yeah.
Yes, there we go. Yeah, so introducing psilocybin mushrooms, she felt like it was necessary, even though I think it was her mother was like, no, 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 don't do that.
Right.
Don't teach Northern American people how to use this stuff. And
Yeah.
she's like, okay, people need healing. And just hearing that message from people who are looking down the barrel of oppression, where they're like, you know what, I know you want us to believe this specific thing, but we still believe that this is the best way to solve our issues, help each other out, embrace society as it is, all centered around some sort of psychedelic, some sort of, that's brilliant.
Yeah,
And
most indigenous groups have some version of that, right? And me being me having my roots in Mexico, I'm Mexican American, and so and me digging into my stuff and very similar kind of like, well, there are these other cultures that use this stuff and it's a tool. It makes them well, and we think, and we just I grew up in the USA, so I had this thing that it's like, oh, it's a drug. It's like no, it's medicine. It's always has been medicine. It's the reason why you don't have the Indios in Mexico aren't like fucking super depressed and shit. They're fucking like, but we are, and yeah, I
why,
get you.
why is it a Schedule One? Like, it's because as soon as you do it and you do it the right way, instead of like a party drug or anything like that,
Sure.
you start realizing you need less and less. You need
Right.
to stop fucking with people all the time. You can harvest your own energy and enjoy who you are as a human being instead of being a fucking succubus all the time.
Sure.
Like, as soon as you break that veil, as soon as you drop the quote unquote ego, you're in the thick of it, and you understand that you should just be a good fucking human being, man.
Yeah, and whatever gets you to realize that, and sometimes it is this plant medicine or fungus, that you ingest and have some sort of experience, right? And I like the not being able to put our finger on it. Is is it this spiritual thing? Is it this sciencey thing and psychological thing, or maybe it's all of them? I don't fucking know. Like, and that's the thing. We want to figure stuff out, and deconstruct everything. Whereas, like, it's not that complicated. Just in Mexico, they're like, just like maybe once a year, twice a year, every 6 months, you got to take those mushrooms and reset, and that's all. That's it. And you don't have to overcomplicate shit, and we do,
We have to justify it all. And once you take it, you're like, I can't justify any of it. I can't even explain it.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I like shamanism. Again, like, this sport helped me mentally, so I've become like a teacher in the sport.
Good.
Same psychedelics helped me, and now I want to be able to help other people with that. So studying shamanism allows me to understand how to practically implement these dangerous things. I mean, they are dangerous.
Sure, then you'd be caution.
I mean, any excuse me, any drug is dangerous. I mean,
Sure.
the shit they're prescribing us right now is not great.
Of course. Yeah. Like they mentioned that the sport made you like a teacher and stuff like this, and like now you can impart new lessons to other people and stuff. The big mushrooms in Mexico, there's several that have psilocybin, but the big ones with the big caps on them, I believe they call them the maestros, which means they're the teachers. Like,
Right.
that's the literal name of what you're going to hunt, the mushrooms, and you're hunting. Oh, that's that kind of mushroom they call the maestros because they teach you lessons.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about, that thing of like, oh man, I've been being shitty to my family, or I've been being unkind to myself in this way, or whatever shit that you come out of. It's that the medicine gives you some interesting lesson.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me.
You should learn something. I remember my first trip, I was on the mountains of Montana, like in the Continental Divide. There's a fucking priest in the back seat, like this young new priest in the back seat. We're all tripping. And I'm crying. I'm just crying. And I'm just like, I wish people could just be happy. I thought about every person that I'm not immediately within arm's reach of that at that moment, and just cried for them. I was like, I'm so sad that they're not as happy as I am right now. I'm very happy. I'm watching the galaxy explode, you know.
Yeah.
And after I was coming down, I thought to myself, everything looks this way. You just have to take the time to see it. And that set me up to be like the best kind of drug user possible. It was like, all right, I don't need this. I can actually meditate myself into a state where I can see stuff. I can feel this kind of things. And that's actually the basis of shamanism, is you don't need to take the drugs. Your patients need to take the drugs, and you have to show them that this is why we take them. You have to set them up to be like, the world is this way. You just were ignoring it the whole time. And now I've shown you what it is. Now you can't unsee it unless you black it out, unless you drown it out with some other bullshit in this world. You want to be able to see it that way constantly. Like, check in with yourself. Can I look at a wall and make it melt? Can I feel elation just by sitting outside and looking at the stars? If I'm not doing that, if I have to look at my phone, if I have to be stimulated by all this other shit, I'm doing something wrong in my life.
Yeah. No, I think people should seek that, and I, for whatever reason, got it like in me. And I've also heard in shamanism that like the fucking plants will call you. I don't know how much I believe in that, but at a certain point, like, I went to Peru and did ayahuasca. I went and did a cool trip for myself, and it was interesting. I did not have any visuals. I did not have a trip and stuff like this. And so I was getting kind of frustrated because we do like 4 ceremonies over a week. And by the third one, I'm like, I ain't seeing shit, man. And I'm frustrated and whatever. And I feel cheated because all these other people I saw have beautiful, profound experiences that blew my mind to just watch and hear and listen to them the next morning. And the shaman pulls me aside. He's like, and I went because I was dealing with a lot of like depression from losing my dad and my brother within about 2 years, less than a year and a half almost. And like, I'm just like struggling. I'm like, I'll fucking go to the Amazon jungle. I don't care. And I go, and then it's not happening for me. And I'm frustrated. And the shaman says, you have to accept the medicine just like you have to accept what happened in your past.
Oof.
And I was like, fuck me. And that was the message. That was it, And then the last ceremony, I had some very like cerebral stuff, no visuals. It was just very like just thoughts that were, about those losses and where I'm at now, and that you do have to accept it and all these things. And it was really interesting that like I went seeking that very profound, quote unquote, traditional psychedelic experience with the visuals and the reality melting. I was still there the entire time. I took the strongest psychedelic known to man, and it didn't do shit to me in terms of that stuff. But I got such a profound message and met amazing people. And that's what I needed to get at that point,
Yeah. You don't need to trip balls in order to just
exactly tripping balls. Yeah. yeah.
Some people do. Some people need earth-shattering stuff because their stuff's that messed up.
Yeah.
They need to be awoken and
a jolt to the system, and that's where it comes from sometimes,
Yeah, but I think that's the proper way to really go about it, is like that mild adjustments, that constant maintenance. We're not encouraged to do that ever.
Yeah.
And to approach drugs that way, and approach shamanism, and approach whatever in life with that nice, gentle adjustments, just the best way to do it, instead of breaking your brain or breaking your body,
Yeah, for sure. Well, shit, man, let me wrap this up, because otherwise I'll keep talking about psychedelic compounds and whatnot. And so,
let's talk about fighting and bikes and psychedelics. Fuck yeah.
No, we covered fucking all the good shit, man. So, hey, Mick, I appreciate you doing this. Yeah, I liked hearing your perspective on this stuff. And I just wish you some good health and more good battles, man.
Hey, thanks so much. And if you want to talk to any more of our combat brethrens, I'll point you in the right direction. Especially like reaching out to the women's teams and stuff. They're kicking ass so hard.
That was going to be one of my suggestions. I was like, find me an armored combat fighter chick. I want to talk to her. So,
oh man, yeah. I mean, just in our school alone, like they've earned their own day where they get their own training because they show up the most and they put in the most work. Like, yeah.
No, that's great. It's one of those things. somebody sent me a message, and just a fan of the show was like, "Oh, I'm glad you include like women in your show and stuff." I was like, "Well, why wouldn't I?" Like, and I'm like, "Well, I was kind of conscious of it because I wanted my podcast audience to be 50-50, which when I'm talking about fighting, I was like, that's never going to happen. I'm at like 55%, 45%. People really love listening to these fighter chicks, you know, boxing, MMA, whatever. And so I would love to have an armored combat woman on here. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, so we'll have to set that up. Yeah.
Sounds great, man. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for hitting me up. Like, it was just really random. Just be like, all right, some guy wants to talk to me about armored stuff. Let's do this. Like,
oh yeah, I'm such a pro. All I do is just slip into people's DMs and like, hey, come on my show. And most of the time they're like, yeah, I'd like to. Cool.
I mean, and you're a really good conversationalist. Like, you just sit down, let's chat. So.
Oh yeah, exactly, man. That's what I like to do. All right, Mick, you be good and you be safe. All right, bud?
Hey, take care of yourself, man. We'll talk soon.
All right, y'all. Thanks for listening to that interview with Mickey Guida, armored combat athlete. Great conversation with him. The fight stuff was really cool. I understand the sport a little bit more. The car stuff was really cool, talking about that as well. The motorcycle stuff. And wrapping up with psychedelic medicine. That was a cool bonus. I was not expecting, but it was a good conversation. If you want to keep up with Mickey and see some of the photos and his bruises and whatnot, you can check him out on Instagram. That is at mick.the.merc. mick.the.merc. You should also follow Nashville Armored Combat on Instagram at nashville.armored.combat. They're on Facebook as well if you search Nashville Armored Combat. If you want to get involved with the sport, you can go over to Facebook and search Armored Combat Sports and join that group, that community. They'll help you link up with a local chapter. As far as the podcast, you know the drill, ridersandfighters.com. Every Sunday, new episodes. Follow us on social media. All right, y'all. Be good. Be safe. Take care of each other. We'll talk next week.